Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We're a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. I'm your host, Chris, the intellectual introvert, and I'm joined today by the Collector.
Hey, this is David.
And the Deluxeifier.
Pete is here.
Once again, Daniela is not with us. She's under the weather. If you heard us a couple of weeks ago, you're saying, my goodness, what's wrong with Daniela? The reality is we're actually recording 2 episodes on the same night, and she unfortunately missed that night. So she's not on her deathbed or anything. It's just a bad night and the wrong night to miss. But today, we're getting our hands dirty, digging into 2 games about working the land and reaping what you sow. We'll start in Europe in the 1600s, grinding grain, collecting clay, sheltering sheep, and urgently wishing for children as we feature our flair for farming in Agricola. Then it's off to Tuscany where the grapes are green and the wine flows free, so try not to blush as we admit our crush on Viticulture. And finally, because we just can't help ourselves, we'll pop the cork on an epic battle as we pit these games against each other in our ultimate showdown, the Battle of the Funnest. But before we start plowing into our discussion, David, what's our topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, well, since it's coming up to holiday season, what is something that you guys would gift to another board gamer? Something that if people are looking for ideas, something that you think would make a really good gift? Because sometimes you don't always know a game they want, but, what could you do outside of that to kind of go along with that holiday spirit, I guess, if you want to say, but not necessarily a board game itself?
You guys have gotten some of my gifts from last year. I actually make coasters. I can customize them. Basically, I take the art from the board game. I have a whole process, and I spend a lot of time learning how to do it. I think I do it fairly well. That's one of the things that I like to do. It's kind of, not directly giving somebody a particular game unless if I know they want it and know they don't have it. I mean, I look at David's here. No chance of me getting him something that he doesn't have. Things that you can get for somebody that are adjacent to the game. Coasters, even a bag to carry around games is really useful. If it's something that you don't have, I use mine all the time, especially when you're going to game groups. I would kind of tend leaning towards those rather than trying to pick a game. Games are very, very subjective when it comes to how much somebody likes it. I'd hate to get a gift from somebody and say, I really don't like that game. So that's my take on it. Chris?
Are you asking what we would get gamers or what we would get someone who's not a gamer?
Either way, you could take that either way, but normally gamers, I think they're a little bit harder. Maybe new gamers, if that makes sense. Somebody that's maybe new in the hobby.
I have no idea. Let me think about that.
My answer to this was, because I've been looking, is a lot of times we really like the tactile feel of things. And so I think a lot of times a newer board gamer, what they won't spend money on, they might buy a game, but what they're not going to spend money on is coins or anything like that. I was looking out there for generic coin sets, and they're actually pretty tough to find, something that actually would fit a lot of different games that feel good. There's a lot of different ones with like pirate themes and space themes, but as far as just finding like a more generic one that's like 1s, 5s, 10s, it's pretty hard to find. So if you're out there making stuff like this, I would really like some sort of metal version that is just very simplified but could work with a lot of games, because I've looked all over Etsy, I've looked over Amazon, a lot of the weird Chinese websites that sell you a bunch of stuff in bulk, and I've had a really hard time finding a solid set of coins that I feel like can go with a lot of different things, because I do think that elevates the game experience for somebody who maybe doesn't play games all the time, but if they had those in their hand, they might play a lot more, because I do think it changes it. Before we met Pete, I never played with metal coins in my life. I was like, I'm too cheap to buy that. And now I don't know the last time I played a game without metal coins. So that kind of tells you kind of where my head's at with that one. You think it's something now, Chris?
Yeah, I think back to basically our last gift exchange, and there were a couple of things that I ended up getting for the group that were game adjacent. I got dice trays. I was asking just clandestinely, what's your favorite color? And ultimately got everybody in the group a dice tray that is of that color. And then there's a Meeple nativity set out there. I know the guy who put it together. It's just sort of a unique thing. You're not going to see many nativities that are just little tiny meeples, but they're out there. And I think at least it makes a pretty unique Christmas decorations. That's a couple of thoughts of what maybe you could do.
Yeah, the Meeple nativity set. We should put this on our Instagram or something, because it is pretty unique. Yeah. I just pulled mine out on the table. So it's about to go up. It's not Thanksgiving yet.
All right, thanks, David. So those are our thoughts on what we might get our gamers that are game adjacent, but we'd love to know what all of you out there have to say. So let us know by sending us an email at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com. Follow us on social media or on our BGG guild, or check out our website at thefifthmeeple.com. And before you forget, why not hit the subscribe button so you never miss a show? If you want to help us grow, one of the best ways is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you do, we're probably going to read it on a future episode. And finally, as always, thank you all so much for listening. Well, guys, we've got bushels to talk about today, so let's dig right into our thoughts on Agricola. Agricola is a 1 to 4 player worker placement game that positions you as a 17th century farmer, plowing fields, raising livestock, and doing whatever it takes to feed your family come harvest time. An expansion increases the maximum player count to 6, proving that there's always room for more down on the farm. Each player starts the game with 2 workers, a 3x5 plot of land, and a 2-room house made of wood. During each round, players take turns placing their workers at one of various spots on the main game board, or on an action space card, one of which is added to the available locations at the start of each round. The locations offer resources like wood, reed, clay, or animals, provide food, or allow you to take actions like building fences, expanding your house, expanding your family, getting a job, or purchasing minor or major improvements for your homestead. At the end of each round, players retrieve their workers, a new action space is added, and a new round begins, with the first player changing only if someone used one of their workers to claim it. After several rounds, and more frequently as the game progresses, a harvest occurs. After harvesting your grain and vegetables, you must feed your family, or, if unable to, hit the streets to beg. After that, any animals you have get friendly, and if you have enough room, a new little animal arrives. When the game ends, players gain or lose points based on how many plowed fields, fenced-in pastures, vegetables, grain, sheep, boar, cows, fenced-in stables, unused farm spaces, clay rooms, and stone rooms they've accumulated. The player with the most points wins the game, but has no time to celebrate because they have to wake up at the crack of dawn and milk the cows. Agricola was designed by Uwe Rosenberg and was first published in 2007, with the revised edition released in 2016 by Lookout Games. All right, guys, we got a lot of work on the farm to do, but we can talk a little bit about this game first. What is it about Agricola that really sings to you?
Well, you had me at worker placement. That's one of my favorite mechanics of games, and this one works really well. I enjoy how each round a new space opens up, and you kind of build on that as you're going on, and new things develop and new locations become available. I really enjoy that. It's very thematic. That's probably the thing that I really enjoy about the game. The other thing that I'll say, which was a little bit of a struggle for me, is this is a game where you have to do a little bit of everything if you want to score well. It took me 2 plays to really realize that, because I do like playing games and I like exploring the games and trying to go different routes and paths. But this is one that you really have a fixed solution that you're trying to get to. And the puzzle isn't in leveraging that. It's taking every little advantage that you can get, because sometimes just one extra wheat or one extra resource can be the difference between being able to feed your workers at the end of the year or not. And that's something that you really, really need to focus on, because if you don't, you end up losing quite a few points. And this is a game that you don't score a lot of points at. I think the average is, 12, 15 points. I'd have to look at that.
We were scoring in the 30s.
Was it that high? Okay.
We're not that bad, Pete.
I might be that bad.
I think one of our games was 40-something, too. I don't think we got above the 40s. But there were people definitely scoring in the teens. And, yeah, you can get a lot of negative points, too. If you're just trying to focus on one thing, I'm going to do it really well, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. So I agree. It makes you explore. It makes you try to do enough of everything, but maybe not everything. You can't do everything of everything, but it's finding, okay, for what's in front of me, how do I put this together and not overshoot it? Okay, I can get an extra vegetable. I'm not getting anything for that, but I'm getting penalized if I didn't get that sheep, and finding that balance. And I think we played with one guy the one time, but man, he had grain out the wazoo, and it didn't do him any good.
That was
me. And like I said, I was exploring, and I'm thinking, I'm going to corner the market on all this grain and all these different things. I was able to feed my people real well, but it's really important to know how to score well in a game. If you are teaching a game to somebody new, that's one of the important things to make sure that they understand. How do you win the game? What is the scoring like? In games like this, you have a path and you kind of have a solution. You want to make sure they're not just going off on tangents like I did. I'll admit that's all on me, and I should have paid a little bit more attention, but I was like, building more farms. I'm building more areas, and I'm doing really great and taking away from other people. Yeah, I'm doing that because I'm taking that spot so other people can't do it. But I think that's one of the takeaways that I have from playing this game going forward, playing it again, really focusing on doing a little bit of everything and looking for those little corners of how can I get just that little extra thing that I need out of this to maybe hold me over for the next season.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying that says, squeezing water from a stone. And if you like doing that, you'll really like this game. Kind of like what they were alluding to. I really like that this game is super tight. It's tighter than a lot of games. You're going for, scrap by like that one thing of grain might just put you over the edge because you have a grain and somebody else doesn't, or you have a cow at the end of the game. And so it just scores you not a negative point, just no points, while somebody else has to take a negative point because they don't have that same cow. And so if you like people across the table just groaning as you're taking spots, this is the game for you because a lot of things happen on this board and there's just no way to kind of get around some of the things. If two people, take a spot, there's no more cows for that round. And there's only so many ways where you can get cows and you might just be like, well, I can't ever do that. The reason why I like this game for me personally is I like just looking around the table and seeing people's faces just in pain all the time because it's just that tight. I will say that I don't always like a tight game, but this game to me, it's extremely tight. It's old school. And it's just kind of like, Pete was saying earlier, it's just pure worker placement to the point, cutthroat as crap. And if you like that kind of thing, which I semi do, this game might be for you.
Yeah, definitely tight. And you put it a little more eloquently than I did. I was thinking, how many times do you hear someone cussing at the table because they can't do what they want to do? That tells you how tight and how solid of a game it is. But the interesting thing, you're talking about it being tight, but I also really like the way the board scales to how many players you have. And I think it does that really well and it keeps it tight. And I think the right level of tightness, regardless of how many players you have, that was really, really well. And I think Uwe's design cred really shines the way he managed that for all of the player counts.
You do feel like you're a farmer, I guess. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the theme comes out almost too much. I'd rather not be so much of a farmer, but if I'm going to be a farmer, I wish there was tractors. So
yeah, you're definitely, I guess that's why I put you in the 17th century. Nope, you're doing everything by hand.
It's got an interesting play. That first, we'll call it the first year before you actually have to do the harvest, you have a lot of actions. You have 4, maybe 5 based upon the number of player counts. But as you go through each harvest, there's less and less positions to go to. That kind of really changes up the game. You might get an extra worker, but everybody's getting an extra worker. There are more spaces out there, but there's still that contention for those particular spots and being able to go out. And one of the things, too, is you can't just go on a spot and block it. You actually have to do that particular function. So, like, if you want to go and build a clay house, you have to have the resources to do that. You can't just block the spot, which is the way that it should be. I think it's very interesting. You have really tough decisions to make on this every turn. Do I go here? Do I go here? What's open? What do I think might be available if I wait? Maybe this is my third option, and that's what I have to go with and make the best of it.
Yeah, I would say the learning curve on this game, even though it's necessarily easy, it's easy to teach because the action is simple. Just go somewhere and get those resources. The actual gameplay of thinking ahead, you really do have to think ahead in this game because the rounds are short, and like kind of Pete was alluding to, as the rounds go on, you get less and less actions before you have to feed your people and harvest again. And because that scales up exponentially, if you build a bad engine early or you're just playing lackadaisical early, this game will not be fun for you because there's no coming back. I don't know a way that you can come back in this game if you don't build a solid foundation early or at least a decent one to come in mid-game. If you're just like, oh, I'm just going to go here and just figure it out, you're going to figure it out, but you're going to be way behind. It's going to definitely take you a couple games. I do think that is part of the joy of this is getting beat so badly the first couple times you play with experienced players, and then every time being like, okay, now I see more and more, because the scoring, I think, is hard to click in on this game, even though you tell people what the scoring is, because the scoring isn't like a lot of modern board games and how it scores, where if you're good at something, normally, you qualify out the points and everything's a point salad. This game is definitely the opposite of that. You're minusing points because you don't have things on your board. I think it's a hard concept to teach people if they've been playing modern board games and trying to do a throwback like this. they just don't understand all the different things. I know we put in a player sheet specifically so that people can see what actually scores points. And even then people are like, I don't even know how to read this. So
yeah, I taught my brother, we play once a week on Board Game Arena. My brother DJ, I felt like he was ready. Hey, we're gonna jack it up a little bit, and I threw Agricola at him. And the day before we were gonna play, I sent him a snap or a picture of here's all the things. Here's how the scoring works. And the first thing he said to me is, "My goodness, when you have to send me a spreadsheet to tell me how scoring works, I know I'm in trouble." But it's important to see that because you got to understand what all those things are. And yeah, I agree. It's probably easy to teach because hey, you just put your worker out there, take the benefit. It's not easy to figure out how to do well.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to get slaughtered a couple of times, or at least that first time to say, how did I do that? And maybe pay attention to what others are doing. And yeah, if you don't get a food engine early, that's going to be your whole game from that point on. I got to take silly actions to feed my people because I didn't plan ahead. Now, I'm going to take a guess, David, at one of the other things that you consider a positive about Agricola. There's a spot that you can go to claim the first player marker. And if you don't have that, if no one claimed that, then the first player just stays as it was before. And I know you've mentioned before that you like the idea of having to compete or being able to compete for that first player marker. And you tend to go there a lot too.
Yeah, I do like that idea. And I do like games where the first player, the turn order isn't always necessarily determined. I like games that make you either pay resources or do something to kind of try to mix it up to see who's going first, who actually thinks it's important, and what it's actually worth. I've actually been reading, can't think of the game's name, but you actually have to spend victory points in order to you're bidding victory points for the first player marker. I thought that was an interesting concept. Can't think of the name of the game off the top of my head, but I heard about this game and I'm like, oh, I kind of want it.
Now, what's really rough, if our fifth Meeple Dave was here, is I remember one game he was sitting to your right. He's like, I'm never sitting to the right of you again, David, because if the person to your left is the first player, what that means is you're the last player. When we're playing a 5-player game of that's really brutal on when it's already a really tight, a really tight worker placement game and you're last. All right, so that's what fertilizes your fields. But what is it about this game that maybe spoils your crops a little bit?
It's really the scoring and having that balance of everything. It's a plus, but it's also a minus for me in my book. We talk about agency and being able to explore and do things. This has a solution, and the solution is to try to get a little bit of everything. If that's what you like, that's great, but that's not what I'm after in a game. So.
And you're not really scoring massive amount of points from any one thing. Like the most points you're going to get is 4. And if you didn't do anything, you're not getting 0. You're getting -1, right? So it's a 2-point. It's either -1 or if you had 1, you go to +1. So it's a 2-point swing if you didn't do anything. And the most you're going to get is 4. So it is balancing. I feel like I've played this game several times when I was first playing it. And it's like, I feel like I'm doing nothing. I feel like I'm doing terrible. And then, I won that game. It's like, what? But I felt like I was doing, it's just, that's the struggle, right? The whole time it's like, my gosh, I can't do anything. And then maybe you're lucky into a game. The last game I played was, I think, the first one where I really felt like, okay, I can see how to put things together. And, I've played with some folks. How did you have everything on there? And that was the first game last time I had everything and I had good scores in a lot of those. I'm not sure I know how I did it, but it's like things fell together for me to where, okay, hey, I finally got things to come together. But even that was a struggle.
When you see an extra wood out there, sometimes you just got to go to that spot and take it because every little piece of wood that you get matters. Every little bit helps. I also think that there are some cards Dave had which allowed him to exchange things. I really wish there was a little bit more of that. If you did have an overabundance of something, that maybe you can go to a market and sell it. I know there's some spots on there where you could do some minor trading, but it's so tight. And I think it's just a little too tight for me.
Yeah. I mean, were there markets in the 17th century? I don't know. I mean, you feel like you're just like kind of like Chris was alluding to. You just feel like a farmer. I mean, you really do. You're just struggling and you look around, you're like, I didn't do anything, but I barely subsisted,
I did a lot. I didn't feel like I accomplished anything, right?
You're just never getting ahead of the game. And this is probably how people felt in the 17th century that were farmers. They're just never getting ahead of the game. But yeah, I do feel that is something I do have to say, because we played and we had a lot of the upgraded components, but for whatever reason, when we played it at 5, I think we even played one at 6 players, we ran out of resources. And that was actually a big detriment, I think, to that gameplay experience. If you're selling us resources and there's supposed to be enough, to play a 6-player game of upgraded resources, either we were playing it way too different or whatever, but, we ran out of resources quite a bit where Chris actually had to 3D print some resources. So if we ever play it again, we can make sure that we have enough components. But that was a little bit of a struggle. There's just nothing like, there's not even like a ×5 card. There's like a weird ×3 and like a ×2. Like you're like, why don't you just make this a ×5? But I get it because the game's supposed to be that tight. So sometimes it's maybe based on how we were playing.
But give me enough
exactly,
pieces. That's so irritating. And maybe there's something, hey, if you run out of so-and-so, well, then give me more so that I don't run out of so-and-so, right? Yeah, I definitely had that down. I want to go back to Card Incorporation, a couple of things on cards. You talked about that one time we played and Dave had this card that allowed him to trade something in or something. Yeah. It was so powerful. I remember thinking, how can he do that? And most of the cards in this game are like, that's a piece of crap, right? Well, I got a handful of cards. I don't want any of them. And then Dave's got this 1 or 2 cards that like, bam. And if you go and play this again on Board Game Arena, there's a list of banned cards that they don't even put in the game because there's certain games that are just broken. And there's a whole list out there of broken or banned cards. There's not a massive amount. But it's like most of those cards are such crap that when you get a card that works, it's like, okay, now it's broken because this one's actually beneficial. The other point I was working towards was I felt like the cards that you get, some of them are so specific of I'm only going to be able to use it at a certain time, or I just look at it, maybe it's my experience level, but like when would I ever want to play this card and waste a turn for this card? Or I got 7 of each card in my hand, I'm only going to ever get to play 3. But yet I feel like there's only 3 I can ever play because the rest of them just don't work. And there's a drafting option, but it's like put all 35 cards on the table and now you get to pick one. You can have analysis paralysis before the game even starts.
Oh yeah.
Right. But you came up with a drafting mechanism. We tried in our last game. And I thought that at least allowed us to build a hand that we could try to work with.
Yeah. And the drafting variant that we did, because a lot of times when you teach this to a new player, it's just so overwhelming. You give them all these cards and you're like, now draft these. And they're like, I don't even see. So what we do to kind of cut down on that time, because it does take a while, is that we just dealt 2 cards to every person. You need 7. So you deal 2, you pick 1, the other one gets trashed. We keep doing that. So the choices are, more limited, but you still have some agency to build the hand that you kind of want to build, hopefully, if you get some cards out of the 7. But it cuts down on that analysis paralysis time, especially with new players. They just don't have a clue half the time what they're trying to pick. But if you give them 2 options, they can pick one or the other that they think might be better. And then as they keep seeing more cards, they can build towards a couple of those, which is nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed that variant.
All right, guys. Well, I think it's about harvest time. So what about final thoughts? David, if we were going to harvest this, what are we getting at the market?
So right now, this game is still holding up. We're going to go with the revised edition, especially. So it plays 1 to 4 players. So you're looking at $63 right now on Amazon. On the used market, you're going to be around 30 to 40. I saw it at our local board game store up the street for about $52. The hard part, though, is the expansion, because a lot of times we like to play games here with at least 5 players. So if you're doing the expansion with this, it's an expansion for 5 to 6 players. And on Amazon, that expansion is $55 right now just for that. If you actually go to BGG, they're only selling used copies for like $120. They don't even have Amazon actually on that for the 5th and 6th player expansion. So I think your best bet is to go to Amazon, but it is $55. I couldn't really see it anywhere else. I think it might be a little bit hard to get. I know if you're really looking for a copy of this game, I bought this game used. It included both Agricola, a couple extra decks, and I think in there because they have extra decks for the game. And the person sold me the 5th and 6th player expansion, and I got it for like $50. But I will say, if you're looking for this game, try to do bundles on this, because people might have it. It's an older game. They might have everything for it. And I think the best way to experience most of this game is to go and find it on the used market and find somebody who has a lot of this stuff and work out a deal with them. That's what I did. And to do the same thing, it'd be over like $110, I think, right now. It's just kind of a little crazy when I saw the numbers. Surprised me a little bit.
As far as upgrading, your version had some upgraded components, which were nice. We were just a little shy on those. If you had the originals in the box with it, that would be good. There's really not much more that I would say to bling this out at all. It's really those components.
Yeah, for me, my final thoughts here, whether I want to play this depends on what kind of mood I'm in, and also I think who's at the table. And I think a lot of the games that I've enjoyed is because of the people that are around the table. And again, you're going to block a lot of people. You got to be in the mood to be able to, I got blocked, I got to find another way, and be in the mood to where you're willing to take a little bit of ribbing from someone and give it to someone. And then you can have can be a really tough, tight game and still have a lot of fun in that struggle because of who's around the table. To me, if I've got the wrong people around the table, I don't want to play this game because I need that interaction with the people to help me get through the struggle. Well, now's probably a good time to trade in our veggies and pork for a bottle and cork, flowing into our discussion on viticulture. Viticulture is a 1 to 6 player worker placement, hand management, and contract fulfillment game set in pre-modern Tuscany. You've just inherited a vineyard, and it's up to you to turn your meager vines into fine, fine wines. Each year starts with spring, when players determine their wake-up order. Wake up earlier, and you'll have a better chance of accomplishing what you want. Sleep in, and though you'll start later, your well-rested mind will be rewarded with key bonuses to help you accomplish your goals. In the summer, starting with the player who chose to wake up first, players take turns placing a worker in one of several available locations, gaining or planting vines, building structures to expand your capabilities, giving tours to earn money, selling grapes, buying or selling fields, or playing a summer visitor card which offers a specific benefit, often at a cost. Vines that you plant will yield red or white grapes, which can later be harvested, turned into wine, and sold. Summer play continues until each player has passed, either because they've run out of workers or because they wish to keep the remaining actions for the winter. In the fall, each player draws either a summer or winter visitor card to add to their hand. Then, in the winter, again in wake-up order, players alternate taking winter actions including drawing order cards, harvesting fields, converting grapes to wine, selling wines to fulfill orders, training new workers to be used in future years, or playing a winter visitor card. Grapes have a certain value when harvested and increase in value over time. Red and white grapes can be converted into red and white wines of value equal to or less than that of the grapes, or can be combined to create blushes or even sparkling wines. Players earn points primarily by selling wines, but also by entertaining visitors and via various other bonuses. The game ends at the end of the year when a player first surpasses 20 points, and the player with the most points when the dust settles wins the game and pops the cork on a 1963 Sauvignon Blanc. Viticulture was designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone and was first published in 2013. We also played with the Tuscany expansion, Vintage 2014. All right, guys, we're out in the fields, planting grapes, stomping on grapes, whatever the case may be. What's the best part about viticulture?
The best part about this game is this is my wife's favorite game, and she will play this with me. It's
That's
something
important.
to be said.
Yeah.
It is important because we all have this hobby that we love and enjoy. It's more enjoyable when we get to share it with other people, especially friends and family. This is one game that she'll happily sit down and play, and it's very, very thematic. It really is. This is a game where you actually feel like you are starting a winery and you're going through each step of that process. I think sometimes people have a hard time grasping that. You got to plant your grapes. Well, then you got to harvest your grapes. Well, then you got to make that wine. Then you got to sell that wine. Well, that takes time to do. And that process may take a year or two to happen. It's just super thematic. That's one of the things. And it really is great that my wife enjoys playing this. We usually play this around Christmas time or right after Christmas. That's one thing that we look forward to. I don't drink wine very much, but I will crack open a little glass. I know when we played our last one, we had some sparkling grape juice. So that was very thematic as well.
Yeah, I want to branch off of what you just said because I have found this game to be relatively easy to teach, I think primarily because the theme comes through so well. I mentioned in previous episodes and maybe earlier in this one that I play with my brother online every week. The week after I taught him Agricola, I said, now we're going to try viticulture. So I was throwing two at him. And this particular one out, he's a pretty smart guy, and so he can pick things up. But usually a game of this depth, we're like, this is going to be a teaching game. I'll walk you through it. After like the third year, he was just going on his own. And I think a big part of that was the theme really comes through. And if a theme is helping you understand why I would do certain things and in what order I would want to do certain things and how to set myself up, that's a really well incorporated theme. Going through that with my brother, I found like, wow, that really helps me to teach this game. And he just picked it up like nothing. And next thing you know, we're playing against each other.
This game is really tough for me to try to say something about. My experiences with it haven't been that great. What do you say about something? I do think the board looks really nice. It's pretty easy to teach, I will say that. This is one of the games where I was hoping I would like it more, and for whatever reason, it just fell flat for me. And I don't know why that reason is. I think I have some things maybe I could share on the other side of it. This is one of the few times where I have to say, my favorite part of the game is when it's over.
Oh,
But
come on.
I know. That's terrible.
Well, let me
to say,
throw,
but
some,
that's
let me
what
throw
I feel
something
like.
at you and see
Yeah.
if maybe you can tie onto this. Another thing that I really like about the game is the wake up order piece of the game, where being the first player in a round doesn't mean you necessarily get to go first, but rather that you get to choose where you go in the playing order. And tying into that, another way of choosing or earning how you go. So balancing that with the rewards you're getting, I think that's a neat little mechanism that, other than knowing that Pete's always going to want to go first and doesn't matter where you go, Pete's going to go ahead of you anyway. But that can lead to some interesting trade-offs. It's a different way of deciding who gets to go first.
That's interesting. I'll share my couple experiences with it. But yeah, I do think that's an interesting mechanic. I do see why people might like this game, potentially. I don't know why, but I also don't like wine. So I think maybe, it's all just coming together. I don't drink wine. I don't really know how it operates. It's just really hard to dig into, especially just because I feel like I played this game, the couple times I play it, I actually play it where I don't produce wine. And so, yeah, I'll talk about that. Some games just don't hit with you.
Well, not every game sings to everybody, so I think that's important to know. One of the things I will say that I think is really special in this game is you have your regular workers and you have one grande worker. Using that grande worker, you will never get locked out of a spot that you want to go to. That really opens this game up so much more. Granted, you can only do it once per season, and that important decision, when do you play that grande worker? As we progress through the different seasons, we go in that particular order until people are passing. So there's a game within the game on when do I need to go first versus when can I go last? When is it super important to me? The prime spots, first come, first serve. Now, we also play a friendly variant where, based upon the number of players, you can get a particular bonus. If you can't take advantage of that, you have to go to the alternate spot, which I think is fair enough. You're not intentionally going and trying to block people from going to a spot. You're really trying to get the most out of your vineyard and really take advantage of every opportunity that you can. So
see, David would be going to that spot just to block. And that's where the fun is in this game for you, David. That's where it's going to be. Don't play the friendly variant, play the other one.
Yeah.
I played a 2-player game. I mentioned I played against my brother DJ. We played a 2-player game last night, and man, was that tight. We played with the original board, and there's just one spot at each place. And that's where it really comes into, am I going to use my grande worker now, right, already? And then what's that going to do later on? There was a lot of interesting decisions. There was a lot of cursing going back and forth. Every time is like, when he went first, I'm cursing on him. When I went first, it was, which I thought was a lot of fun. Is every time you wanted to do something, that other person just going right in front of you. I also discovered using that original board, because we had played with the Tuscany expansion every time, and then I played just on the original board against my brother. It is a very different game. Yes. I don't know if I decided which one's better or worse. I enjoyed playing on that board as well, and I also found, some of the things, the extra buildings, I had never built a yoke for myself. Like, I don't feel like I need to do that because I was always playing multiple players. I was going to be able to go and harvest my field. But I was really, I happened to get a papa that gave me the yoke for free. That's the only reason I had it. I used it almost every year because you can't harvest a field on the original board until the winter.
Yeah.
But with that yoke, I could do it in the summer. And then I didn't have to worry about going there first. I could look at my brother. He's going to have to harvest. I can get in front of him doing this. And I used that. I started the game saying, I guess I'll take this yoke. I never use it. And then I'm using it every year. And DJ's like, oh yeah, you never use it. I was like, man, I have discovered, something new about that game. It made me wonder about those other buildings. And I'm like, why would I do that? Well, probably when I get the right play, I'm going to understand why I would do that. Because that yoke was everything for me in that game.
I do like the way that you start. We play with the mamas and the papas, and that gives you a starting point, how many cards you start with and how many workers. And you do have that decision on, do I start with this building that you get, or do you want the extra money? And a lot of times the costs are about the same, but you got to figure out, is it worth that worker placement to build that building ahead of time, or do you want to use that money for something else? There's some things about the game too that we'll get into that I think could be better.
Well, let's start talking about that then, because David's really struggling to find something positive. but sometimes you do get a skunky wine, and so let's just get into it.
Let's have David start with.
Yeah. I mean, to me, some games they just feel slow. We were talking at a previous episode, Arc Nova to Chris. By the half the game, he's like, "When is this game gonna be over?" I think that's how I feel about this game. I see other people and they're doing stuff, and maybe it's because every time I do this, I don't really go after wines because I feel like it's very it's a long process. It's very hard. I don't like to play that route, I guess, and maybe that's the route you're supposed to play because it's a winemaking game. But a lot of times, even when you awake, I played a version where I was always going to spot number 6, which spot number 6 always gets you victory points. And I must have did that for like 12 rounds and just got 12 free points throughout the game that I was playing, and then, you know, scrapped out points here or there and ended up winning. But it was probably one of the most unsatisfying wins that I've ever had in a board game, because I felt like I was just trying to get the game to be over. So all I was doing was like, I just want points so that I can get this game to be over. And maybe the people that I was playing with too at the time, you know, if they're not pushing endgame, they're just having fun creating wine. I'm just struggling because nobody wants to score any points. And in order for this game to end, points have to be accumulated. So to me, it's one of those things where sometimes you look around the table and for whatever reason, if you're not the person pushing the game to end, you see everybody else just loving their vineyards and, oh, we're just going to keep growing stuff. I'm like, guys, can we just end the game? And I think maybe it was the night too. I don't know. Maybe I should drink wine with this game. Maybe I'd like it more. There was just a lot of things that I don't know. It didn't click with me. I didn't find it very fun, but I could see why other people do.
That sounds like a really slow game. If you're able to just accumulate them that slow and still no one's going. People are drinking a little too much wine playing that game.
I just wanted somebody to beat me at that point in time. You know, it's one of those games where it's like, somebody just put me out of my misery and win, because I don't even want to win at that point. I just want it to be over. And, you know, maybe I did play the game right. Maybe I played it with the different engines and I, you know, take full blame of that. Yeah, I just didn't. I've played this game twice, and both times I've played it, I just not seen the magic. It's a game that I haven't played a lot. I do admit that, just because I just have such bad experiences with it that I don't know if I want to keep coming back.
Which is interesting, because I've been playing it. I've been playing the solo version on BGA, and I've just really been enjoying it. But in the games that we've played at the table, I've also seen some blowouts. And if someone can get a solid engine built first, ahead of anybody else, the points just start to generate themselves. If you get that engine where once you got a good field and you're able to get the actions, which if you got enough players, you're probably going to be able to find ways to do them. It's just points are generating, boom, boom, boom. And then I also feel like once you get that engine running, as you sell a wine, now you've got residuals, now you've got more money, and I feel like that's a rich get richer kind of thing, which is weird to me. And I remember mentioning that one time. I think, Pete, you said, well, yeah, it helps to push the end game and all that, but it just seems odd that, okay, since you were successful here, we're going to give you another bonus and let you be even more successful. And if you can get out in front of that, even in a multiplayer game, if you get out in front, now you've got that extra money and you've got your engine going first, I feel like you're going to win unless somebody really pulls something off. Yeah. And this last game, I was the one that got that engine going, and it was a blowout. And even for me, it felt unsatisfying, because I knew it was, because I got my stuff done first. Yeah. And it was just, I didn't have to do anything. It was just points were practically generating themselves.
In that last game that we played, I missed harvesting a field or making wine, which cost me some points. And it might have been a little bit closer, but you definitely had an engine going. My biggest complaint with the game is really the order fulfillment. When you get those cards, you may have some things like the sparkling wine, or there's the blush, which you need more grapes to make. And sometimes it's really hard. First of all, you got to get the fields to match what that is. And sometimes you're digging through those cards and they just don't show up. Now, I know Dave, our fifth meeple, he sent me over a link which has some alternate ways, and I don't know if there's like a drafting version of being able to maybe collect the right orders that you want. When we talk about games with cards and randomness, that's part of the game. Sometimes you get lemons and you got to make lemonade with it. This time you're trying to make wine with what you can.
And when you try to make wine with lemons, it's probably pretty tough.
It's probably not as flavorful as it should be.
The game you're describing, I had with my brother last night. When it started out, I got 3 orders like, okay, this is an 8 sparkling wine. This is not the right time to get this. And I got another one. I was like, okay, I need red grapes. I don't hack it. And I'm just drawing green card. But what I did was I was looking at it saying, okay, well, I'm going to try to set myself up so that when I do get to the point, not only do I have that one, but I've set myself up to then eventually be able to get those other orders. It worked out, but it was also DJ's first game. I don't think that would have worked out. It would have been very frustrating.
Yeah.
If I was sitting there like, okay, there's nothing I can do. If I'm getting orders that don't match my grapes, and I can only get, a green card once, especially in a 2-player game. There's just no other way to get that. If you had that experience, David, I could see what that would be like.
That basically describes my experience. Yeah. Well, exactly what I was going to say. Pete, I feel like described certain games that I played, and trying to draw those cards. It's so hard to get into that spot to get that one card, and then you're seeing it, you're pulling it, and you're like, you just laugh because you're like, there's just no way. I'm just going to keep putting my marker on the 1 point to try to keep going up slowly. That describes a lot of my gameplay experience. I wish there was something different with that mechanic, and I'd probably like it a lot more. not seeing a lot of those cards. And then when you pull, because you spend so many things to get there, to be able to pull that, you pull it, and then somebody else pulls the next round, they get exactly what they want.
It can be frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's part of the game. Any of these games that have random cards and you're picking and you get what you get and you got to make the best of it. And I think that's part of the puzzle. You know, sometimes you're on the winning side and sometimes you're on the losing side, and you just got to figure out, how do I make the best of the situation that I have? And I think that's what I like about the game. There's no super recipe. If everything aligns for you, yeah, it works out great. But a lot of times that doesn't.
Even if it was like pick 2, take 1, I would take that. I just feel like there's not enough agency in the game to feel like I'm just draw blinding out of like 40 cards. And
you're an old
and I think
world,
that's
you're an old world Tuscany, man. There's no internet. You can't just go find in the orders you want.
And I think that's one of the variants they say when you actually draw a green card for the grapes or draw a wine order, that you draw 2 and you get to choose and put it away. I can see where that could really help smooth out some of those hurdles, because sometimes you just get the wrong cards. But again, you just got to make the best of what you get. That might be a variant that we could try next time if you're ever up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like David's going to be.
Maybe.
David's going to be.
If I
up
lose
for
a
it.
bet.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think the wines are aged pretty well. David, I know you avoid this game, but if somebody wanted to buy it, what's the market look like out
Yeah,
there?
so right now on Amazon, this game is going for the Essential Edition, plays 2 to 6 players. You're looking at $65. And if you do like wine, I mean, I say, go ahead and go get this game. Used, though, somebody must have the same opinion as me, because right now, and I don't think it's going to be there long, but somebody has this used on BGG for $11. Actually, it's $10.75. So if you want it, go text this person and go grab it, because normally it's around, even used, at around $30.
If you're listening, never mind, because I'm jumping on BGG right now and seeing if it's still there.
So that guy must hold the same opinion as me. But otherwise, if you go to your local board game store, because Viticulture's been out for a little bit, I mean, you're going to pay around $48-50. I think you can find it used around $30-35 pretty easily. If you find somebody who really doesn't like the game like me, $11 is probably where you can find it at. So there you go.
All right. Well, a couple things that I have with my game. Obviously, I do enjoy the game. This is one of my top games. So we went through that in our top 15. One of the things I did was I got the actual Viticulture coins, and they are themed. They're very nice to play with. I just enjoy having those coins. One of the things I wish they had was a better player board. You're putting little wine tokens out on spots, and it's easily bumped and moved around. I just wish they had something a little bit better, maybe an overlay or something like that. But I did kind of want to bring that up, and as we were talking about things that are a downside with it, similar to some of the other games that we talked about.
All right, I'm still looking for the game, so I need another minute. This was the first edition that was $11, it looks like, but still, it's pretty much the same game.
The Tuscany version also gives you those mamas and the papas cards, and it gives you some other expansions that you can incorporate into the game. There's quite a bit more that Tuscany version gives you versus over just the regular Viticulture game. So something else to keep in mind. If you do enjoy Viticulture and you want a little bit more, I would suggest looking at the Tuscany expansion.
And is everything in that one, Pete? Like, so the Tuscany one, is the original base game in there or no?
No, the base game, I actually pulled the base player board out. They give you a different board, which has, instead of basically three different seasons, like a spring, fall, winter, and then the Tuscany version actually goes spring, summer, winter, fall. So there's more diversion between each of the seasons versus the one in the middle where you're doing both. As Chris said, at the very end is when you would harvest or make the wine.
Got it.
All right, if you're interested in that game that David mentioned, Tough, I've already sent a note to see if it's still available. But as far as my final thoughts on Viticulture, I played this game the first time with Pete and our fifth meeple, Dave. I enjoyed it right off the bat. I've enjoyed it ever since. I found it easy to teach to folks. It didn't matter to me if we're playing the Tuscany experience, we're playing the base game. They're different experiences. I liked them both. This was a game that really spoke to me, and I actually went online to try to buy it the other day. Found something else that was a little cheaper that ended up catching my eye, but now maybe I'll get a used version for myself. So I enjoyed this game, and again, I think it's a theme that I'm not a wine drinker, but I enjoyed the theme, and again, the theme helped me learn it and helped me teach it. So I think a pretty solid game. There's a reason that it's thought of the way it is in most areas. But now is probably a good time to bottle this one up and head into today's Battle of the Funnest. All right, everyone, the moment of truth has arrived. It's time to separate the men from the boys and the games from the toys. We're pitting these games head-to-head against each other in the ultimate face-off. In one corner, weighing in at 3.45 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 8.0. First seen sprouting from the ground in the 17th century, capable of building an entire house from nothing but reed and clay, the pugilistic plower of petite pumpkin pastures, the shaman of sheep, the bovine boss, where's the beef? Agricola. In the other corner, weighing in at 2.89 out of 5 with an overall BGG rating of 8.0. Aged to perfection with acidic affection, making other games jealous as it climbs the trellis, earning the admiration of Fermentation Nation, the Principal Pinot, the Merlot Monarch, the Sovereign Sauvignon, stick a cork in him because he's done Viticulture. And now, let's find out who brings the rain and who gets crushed in today's Battle of the Funnest Showdown. Okay, guys, you know how this works. We're going to evaluate these games head-to-head in 5 different categories: theme and production, mechanisms, value for your time, replayability, and the fun factor. The game that gets the most votes wins each category, and the game that wins the most categories takes the prize in our Battle of the Funnest. So, all right, cellar dwellers, it's harvest time. Let's get this started with theme and production. Pete.
This one's pretty easy for me. The theme really comes through in viticulture. I really feel like I'm creating a winery and producing grapes, crushing them, making wine, selling the wine. Just hands down, viticulture, I think, just does it in the theme, and even the production, I think, is very solid. So I'm going to go with viticulture. We'll go to Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to go with viticulture as well. Although, speaking of theme, you know, the theme of Agricola is, man, you're really going to struggle to get things done, right?
Yeah.
And you're just going to try not to starve. I will say that comes through. I don't know if that's an experience I'm looking for. Man, that sure felt like I was going to starve. But I also mentioned that, hey, the theme helps with the understanding of the game as well. I'm just going to go with viticulture, but we'll go to David to see, is this his first of 5 votes for Agricola, or when we break it down, does something speak to you, David?
Yeah, so for me, the themes on both of these are quite similar. I think they both do what they're looking at very well. So to me, it comes down to production, and I actually like the production of viticulture a little bit better. So surprisingly, I'm going to let it be a clean sweep and go with viticulture this one.
All right, theme and production, viticulture takes it. We'll go on to mechanisms, and I'll go back to David.
Yeah, for mechanisms, I think they're both pretty simplistic. I do like the tightness of one. I think it's an original, it's an OG for a reason, and I think Agricola just does what it does well and makes everything tight no matter what the player count is. And to me, I like that mechanism. It's not an original, but back in the day it was, and so I'm going that way on this one. I'll pass it over to Pete.
I'm going to go with viticulture, and the reason being mostly is that grande worker. It really does open up the game. You never feel like you're really stuck. You always have an option. The other thing, too, I think there's a lot of games that I enjoy with the order fulfillment, and that just speaks to me a little bit more than building out the farm. I do like them both, but I think mechanism-wise, I think viticulture just has a little bit more of what I'm looking for in a game. Chris?
Yeah, I look at Agricola, and one of the things that I mean, it is relatively straightforward. I think it is pretty neat where there are some accumulation spaces where if someone doesn't go to those spaces, then they start to get more powerful. You're going to get more of a benefit. I think that's a pretty neat way to differentiate some spaces, maybe get someone to go somewhere they wouldn't. Conversely, in viticulture, I like the way as you get more players in the game, you've got those bonus spaces, and are you going to go and be able to grab that bonus? Or even if you don't, maybe there's another bonus. So I like that as well. I think they're both relatively the same, but for me, when I think about, well, which mechanism do I enjoy more? It felt like viticulture was the one that spoke to me. So I'm going to go with viticulture there, which means that viticulture takes mechanisms again, up 2-0 on Agricola. We'll go to value for your time. I'll start. I'm going to stick with viticulture here as well. Both of these, I feel like, took about the same amount of time. Viticulture, I'm enjoying it. It's going faster. Agricola is just that struggle. It makes it feel like it's taking longer for me. I'm going with viticulture here. I'm going to go to David.
Yeah, so I was looking at the plays that I did. It is around the same amount of time. Both plays are around 2 hours. I'm just under 2 hours, but for whatever reason, it might as well be 4 hours for Viticulture for me. So I'm going with Agricola because I just can't play Viticulture. I'm just struggling there. Going over to Pete.
Well, this is going to be based off of mostly my wife, and just having that time with her and playing a game that she enjoys, that value is off the charts for me. So Viticulture is going to win it hands down for me there.
Okay, so Viticulture 2-1 wins value for your time. Interestingly, Daniela's not here. She did send me her picks, and her pick for value for your time was neither. With the next, I can tell you that for those of you who like, hey, I kind of associate more with Daniela. Which one did she like? She didn't like either one of these games, right? And so we're not at the fun factor yet, but her comments down there were hated them both. So take that for what it is. But in this case, value for your time, Viticulture takes it. We go on to replayability. I'll go back to Pete.
This one was a little bit tough for me, but I think I'm still going to stick with Viticulture. I like Agricola where you have a set solution, but I think in the long run that's my answer to the game, and I like having different options. We didn't dive into it too much, but as David alluded to before, there's different ways to score points in Viticulture, which I think just gives me a little bit more of the replay value. There's a lot of different cards that come up that give me the option to maybe try something different. I've played some games where I went backwards first to give myself that little extra replayability. I think Viticulture in the long run, I just have fun playing it every time that I play. So I'm going to go with that. We'll go to David.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to go with Agricola on this one for replayability. I think exactly what Pete said, except I think of it for Agricola. Part of the reason is I think that once you start playing this game a lot, especially with players that play a lot, I think that you're actually playing more of the other players than you are the game sometimes. I think there are certain things that if you see a player going to, you block them. And I think that as you play this game more, and I think you see it especially like on Board Game Arena and stuff like this, I think that there is a big meta and there's a lot of competitive players in this game. And I think the fact that there are so many competitive players playing this game at a high level is because it's very much a skill-based game. It's not necessarily luck. I don't think you're going to luck into a win when you play Agricola. I'm not saying that with Viticulture, but I know that the more you play this game, the harder it is to beat you. For that, I'm going to go with Agricola. Going over to Chris.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with Agricola as well, which is interesting because I'm going back to Viticulture more, but I feel like it is kind of the same experience each time. And I feel like, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to try to do every time. Even though I could explore other areas, I think that there's a core of you're going to have to try to do these things. Agricola, it's going to be a struggle the whole time. I lamented earlier about, well, man, most of the cards you get are crap, but there's a couple that if you play them, okay, that starts to get you down a path. And okay, maybe your food engine is this time and it's that next time. I think there is a lot of different paths your game can take in Agricola as opposed to Viticulture. And so I'm going with Agricola there, which means finally pulls out a win. Again, Agricola is a struggle, but eventually you figure it out. And so Agricola takes replayability, but now we go to the fun factor. I already mentioned you, Daniela would consider this the fear factor. She's like, none of these are fun. I'm going to kick this one off. I'm going to go with Viticulture just because, again, Agricola, I think is more of a struggle. It's fun in a different way. You're trying to find that way to piece the things together. I don't know that I'm smiling a lot when I'm playing Agricola. It doesn't mean I'm not necessarily enjoying it. That's different to me than having fun. Viticulture, I think it's just a fun game, and maybe it's the theme. I don't know, but I'm going with Viticulture, but I will kick it to David. Fun factor.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. I'm going with Agricola on this one. The fun factor for me is just seeing the pain on people's faces. If you really like a tight, kind of more cutthroat, in-your-face game where, you enjoy other people's pain, then this is the game for you. I thoroughly enjoy that. I thoroughly enjoy seeing the struggle on other people's faces as they're trying to figure out, can I feed my family or not? Are they going to die? I like that. I like the struggle. They might not enjoy it, but I enjoy watching them. So for me, Agricola is going to be on that. Kicking it over to Pete.
This one's pretty easy for me. When it comes to fun, it's who you're playing with and are you having a good time laughing? We took Viticulture on vacation with us to Hilton Head. We were in the middle of a hurricane and we played this. There was wine flowing Everybody was laughing. We didn't finish the game, but we had fun playing it, laughing about trying to do this. And yeah, it was a teach game. It was just such a good time and an experience that I'm never going to forget. So, when it comes to having fun, that's what it is for me. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy games that challenge my brain when there's a real puzzle. With Agricola, I feel like I'm scraping for every morsel of food. Fun-wise, I always have a good time when I play Viticulture. That's my vote.
All right, so Viticulture takes fun factor, and that's going to do it, folks. With a score of 4-1, Viticulture crushes the competition and wins today's Battle of the Funnest. Well, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our selection today. And if you'd like to get in touch, just email us at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com or reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, may all of your years be vintage ones. Goodbye, everyone.
Hasta luego.
Thanks for listening.
During each round, players take turns placing their players. Is it made of wood? Wake up earlier. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, the Meeple Nativity said we should put this on our Instagram.